Coral had always imagined that forming Salty Cromwell Cove's very first Mermaid barbershop quartet would be the easiest thing in the ocean besides floating. How hard could it be? You gathered three friends, decided who would sing lead, bass, baritone, and tenor, and then you practiced until the chords shimmered like sunbeams through turquoise water. That was the plan. The difficulty surfaced the moment she placed four neat stacks of waterproof parchment atop the warm granite slab they used as a rehearsal riser. Seconds later, a herring gull named Captain Feathersnatch swooped down, scooped up the tenor part with his yellow beak, and flapped off toward the cliffs with a victory screech that echoed like a squeaky door hinge. The quartet's very first rehearsal lasted precisely 12 seconds. Fathom, whose speaking voice was as cavernous as his bass notes, poked his head above the ripples. "Well, it appears terrestrial interference has begun." He said it the way a weather forecaster might announce incoming fog, calmly, clinically, and with just a hint that he'd secretly bet on calamity. Echo, the quartet's sprightly baritone, smacked her tail on the surface and splashed everyone within radius. He stole only the tenor line. Technically, we still have 3/4 of a chart, she grinned. "Let's call ourselves the Optimists and rehearse the rest." Bubbles, the tenor, flicked silver strands of seaweed from her bangs and sighed. "The Optimists would need to know the tenor line. I'm the one who got robbed. Without me, you'll just be humming glorified karaoke." Bubbles possessed the kind of voice that could coax a seahorse to gallop, but she also had a melodramatic streak wide enough to surf on. Coral retrieved the other three stacks and tucked them under a convenient starfish, who agreed to hold still for a small fee of plankton. "All right," Coral said determinedly. "We'll swim to the cliffs, negotiate with Captain Feathersnatch, and retrieve the missing page. Diplomacy first. If that fails, we go to Plan Barnacle." Echo's eyes glowed. "What's Plan Barnacle again?" "Glue," Fathom muttered. "Copious, unrelenting glue, though barnacles call it embracing for eternity." Bubbles considered the image of barnacle-encrusted sheet music, forever welded to a rock. "You know, in a strange way, that's still more practical than my last choir, where we lost our pitch pipe for 3 months." The quartet set out, tails powering through waves while gulls circled overhead like errant punctuation marks. They found Captain Feathersnatch on a guano-splattered ledge, preening and crooning snippets of the tenor line with suspicious accuracy. Apparently he was a quick study. He noticed his audience, puffed his snowy breast, and belted the final tag in a ringing falsetto that made 2 pelicans applaud with their beaks. "Sir," Coral called in her friendliest diplomatic tone, "we require that sheet music. It belongs to our quartet. Kindly return it, and we shall leave you a complimentary ticket to our first public performance, plus a bag of deluxe sardine crackers." Captain Feathersnatch considered the offer. Then, in a gesture that historians would later describe as magnificently petty, he tore the parchment into confetti and let the breeze scatter it like wedding rice. For 10 stunned seconds, nobody spoke. Even the wind paused out of respect for the audacity. Finally, Echo said, "Well, at least he recycled," Fathom rumbled. "We now move directly to Plan Barnacle." Glue proved ineffective because gulls weren't interested in glued papers. They were interested in the act of theft itself. It seemed the quartet had stumbled into a long-standing cliffside game called Grab and Flaunt, in which gulls systematically stole items from unsuspecting beachgoers, then competed to see who could perform the most dramatic aerial display with the contraband. Sheet music, with its flappy corners and satisfying crinkle, was currently worth triple points. Coral scheduled the next rehearsal underwater, 20 feet below the surface beneath a kelp canopy. Gulls, she reasoned, were notoriously poor divers. The quartet floated in a ring, music tucked into transparent plastic bubbles borrowed from a jellyfish research lab. Fathom took a breath to establish the starting note. Just then, bubbles of laughter drifted from above. Captain Feathersnatch had enlisted a squadron of cormorants, diving birds with an inconveniently high lung capacity. They torpedoed downward, popped the protective bubbles with precision pecks, and rocketed back up, holding all 4 stacks like victorious spearfishermen. This time Bubbles wept saltier tears than the surrounding seawater. "How," she wailed, "can harmony survive when the soprano section of the sky keeps mugging us?" Echo, ever solution-oriented, suggested outsourcing. Let's consult Maestro Inkwell. If anyone can out-strategize birds, it's an octopus. 8 brains, 8 arms, multifaceted genius. Plus, he owes me a favor from when I got him out of that crossword scandal. Maestro Inkwell resided in a coral gazebo festooned with seashell wind chimes tuned to pentatonic scales. He listened to their tale while adjusting pince-nez glasses that refused to stay on his non-existent nose. "You don't have a music problem," he declared. "You have a prop problem. Gulls fixate on tangible loot. Remove the prop, remove the temptation." Dead silence greeted the insight until Fathom ventured, "We can't memorize 4-part arrangements overnight." "Then," Maestro Inkwell said, flicking ink with dramatic flair, "convert your sheet music into something useless to gulls, yet useful to you. Try luminescent algae scrolls. To birds they look like ordinary slime. To you they glow with notation only visible underwater." The quartet spent the afternoon with the maestro brewing vats of bioluminescent ink, painting careful notes onto kelp strips, and chanting mnemonic rhymes. Key of C, chord of G, shimmer like an emerald sea. When the strips cured, they appeared drab brown on land, but lit up like neon runways the instant they entered seawater. Confidence renewed, the mermaids convened at twilight for rehearsal number 3. Coral raised her baton, a polished narwhal tusk, and counted them in. Bubbles fired the opening tenor pickup. Echo nailed the baritone slide. Coral's lead soared buttery and bright, and Fathom's resonant submarine bass planted the chord's foundation so firmly that listeners a mile away felt their clamshells vibrate. At the tag, they locked into a ringing overtone that sent a school of sardines spelling out "wow" in synchronized swimming letters. No gulls, no cormorants, no theft. Finally, success. "Again?" Coral cried, euphoric. They repeated the song, polishing vowel shapes and tweaking dynamics until even Meister Inkwell, covertly observing from behind a curtain of kelp, declared their sound sanguinely sensational. The next dawn, posters appeared throughout Salty Cromwell Cove announcing the inaugural Sea Breeze Festival. The quartet was booked as the mid-morning act on Seashell Stage. Fame beckoned. Children would slurp seafoam smoothies while humming along. Tourists would buy souvenir scallop magnets shaped like the quartet's faces. Maybe they'd even get verified on Siren Song. The hottest social media conch network. 2 days before the festival, gull hostilities resumed in a new form. With nothing left to steal, they targeted the quartet's rehearsal space directly. They dive-bombed, screeched, and flung shells like avian catapults. Fathom's music stand took a direct clam to the hinge and toppled. Echo barely dodged an incoming crab. The gulls didn't need the music anymore. They simply wanted the drama. Coral called an emergency summit at the Tide Pool Cafe. Over kelp lattes, she laid out a 3-point plan titled Operation Harmonious Deter. 1. Relocate rehearsal to the grotto beneath Slumbering Seal Rock, whose vaulted architecture created natural reverb and whose entrance was guarded by a grumpy monk seal named Doris. 2. Equip each quartet member with portable ear conches containing backup recordings of their parts in case of last-second music loss. 3. Develop a counteroffensive song, an original number with sonic frequencies specifically unpleasant to gulls but delightful to marine life, thus repelling avian intruders without harming them. Bubbles blinked. "You want us to weaponize harmony?" "It's technically more of an acoustic fence," Coral clarified. Fathom shrugged. If Mozart had gull problems, Don Giovanni would contain an intermezzo called Recitative of Repulsion. They agreed, and Echo volunteered to compose the new piece, The Anti-Gull Galliard, featuring crunchy augmented chords and a high overtone whistle, achievable only by mermaid throat singing. After one rehearsal, Doris the monk seal begged them never to repeat the passage within her auditory radius again, which meant it was perfect. Festival morning dawned crisp and gull-infested. White-feathered troublemakers perched on string lights, lampposts, and umbrella tops, eyeing programs and churros with equal greed. Backstage at Seashell Stage, Coral peeked through the curtain at an audience dotted with squealing children, dignified sea captains, and one jellyfish in a bowler hat. She felt that fizzing mixture of excitement and dread performers labeled sparkle guts. The quartet assembled in a huddle. Everyone wore their luminescent kelp scroll tucked into a shell clip, but hoped not to need it. Echo slung her conch earbuds around her neck like a good luck charm. Fathom cracked jokes about sequin tailwarmers. Bubbles practiced scales so quietly it sounded like someone sighing musically inside a cave. Suddenly, on the opposite side of the curtain, Captain Feathersnatch strutted down the aisle, wearing a strip of seaweed like a ceremonial sash. It seemed he had come not merely to sabotage, but to bask in the spectacle. He gave a regal nod to the mayor, then took a seat on the VIP perch reserved for pelicans with maverick attitudes. The MC, a walrus with impeccable diction, announced, "Please welcome our harmonic heroines of the Deep Cordelia. They made chosen after 5 excruciating committee meetings." Cheers erupted, flipper claps thundered, and the curtain ascended. Coral raised her arms, the audience hushed. On the very first chord, something astonishing happened. The Gulls, sensing prime mischief potential, formed an airborne wedge and swooped as one. Yet instead of snatching music, they erupted in spontaneous counterpoint cawing, exactly a minor third above the quartet's tonic. Accidentally, they had created a bizarre 12-part texture, half human gull cacophony, half avant-garde masterpiece. Echo's eyebrows climbed her forehead. They're harmonizing? Bubbles shot Coral a mischievous glance. When life gives you goals, make goofy gull chords. Coral made a lightning-fast decision. She pivoted the set list. Abandoning their opening ballad, she launched into the anti-gull galliard. Only she left out the repellent whistle. Instead, she used the song's unusual harmonic structure as a scaffold for audience participation. She gestured at Captain Feathersnatch like a game show host inviting a contestant on stage. The gull captain preened, delighted at the spotlight, and issued a piercing high note that dove squarely into the chord's missing fifth. The crowd gasped, then laughed, then clapped a syncopated rhythm. Children imitated the gulls. Dignified sea captains joined the bass line 2 octaves lower. Maestro Inkwell, seated in the third row, whipped out a conductor's baton made from coral polyps and began cueing sections. Mermaids here, gulls there, civilians on the backbeat. What began as potential catastrophe mutated into an impromptu mega quartet where species boundaries evaporated in glorious noise. Even Doris the monk seal poked her whiskered head from the wings and contributed a baritone honk. Midway through the second chorus, the chord locked so perfectly that a shimmer ran through the air like heat lightning. Sea glass wind chimes across the boardwalk rang in sympathetic resonance. Down on the seabed, anemones spiraled open. Tourists captured phone shell videos that would later trend under Gullibilly Groove. The finale approached. Coral signaled Bubbles for the climactic tenor tag. Bubbles took a breath, but Captain Feathersnatch screeched the note first, dead center pitch, vibrato fluttering like a tiny flag. Bubbles, unfazed, glided up a whole step and improvised a descant above him. Echo mirrored with a sliding fifth, Fathom dropped a subharmonic rumble, and Coral sustained the root until the auditorium vibrated like a struck gong. As the last overtone fizzled into silence, the crowd erupted. Fish jumped from the waves and executed unintentional stage dives into front row laps. Gulls flapped in applause, which is similar to regular applause but messier. Backstage, the quartet collapsed in a puddle of adrenaline, laughing so hard they hiccuped Bubbles. "I can't believe that worked," Coral gasped. "I can," Echo replied, slicking stray hair behind her ear fin. "Chaos is just harmony waiting for a time signature." Fathom held out a webbed high five. "Friends, we have achieved something historians will misreport for centuries." Bubbles glanced toward the curtain, where Captain Feathersnatch was currently signing autographs by stamping programs with his feet. "So, do we press charges or offer him a gig?" Coral pondered. "Why not both? He stole from us, but he also brought down the house. Let's pay him in sardine crackers and an indefinite probationary period." They returned to the stage for an encore. This time, prepared, Coral addressed the audience. Ladies, gentlemen, fish of indeterminate classification and flight-enabled collaborators, we'd like to premiere a brand new arrangement titled A Wing and a Wave. Maestro Inkwell, would you care to direct? The octopus glided forward, arms radiating like a star, baton poised. He cued a downbeat. The quartet launched into a jazzy tune featuring call and response between mermaid scatting and gull caws. Fathom laid down a walking bass line so smooth it qualified as a slip hazard. Echo and Bubbles traded riffs, each more ridiculous than the last. Trills, growls, yodeled glissandi. Captain Feathersnatch, perched on a mic stand, nailed the high-note punchlines. The audience clapped in polyrhythms they hadn't known existed. It was joyous nonsense fused with legitimate musicianship comedy's highest form. When the final chord resolved, feathers floated like confetti. Seabreeze Festival staff handed the quartet a trophy, shaped like a treble clef twined with seaweed. Its engraved plaque read, "For outstanding contribution to interspecies harmony." Later, at the after-party held in Doris's grotto, the quartet toasted victory with coconut shell cocktails. Captain Feathersnatch perched on a driftwood beam above them, ceremonially shredding an expired parking ticket instead of sheet music. Personal growth in his own way. "We still have rehearsals tomorrow," Coral reminded the group, ever the pragmatist. "The Cove's holiday parade is next weekend. We'll need new charts." "No problem," Echo said. She motioned toward a cluster of juvenile gulls perched nearby, their beaks smudged with leftover festival sure. "We have apprentices now. They can pass out music instead of stealing it," Bubbles giggled. "Imagine the tagline, Cordelia, now featuring the Gull Choir, we steal the show, not the sheets." Fathom raised his shell goblet. Two improbable alliances, unexpected overtone blends, and the thrill of solving problems in the most musical way possible. They clinked shells. Bioluminescent plankton swirled overhead like a galaxy. Somewhere outside, the tide sighed against rock, carrying away whatever tension remained. The quartet hummed a soft chord, instinctively finding balance. Coral's warm lead, Bubbles' nimble tenor, Echo's cozy baritone, Fathom's rumbling bass, and, drifting in from the entrance, Captain Feathersnatch's clear, avian soprano. Perfect five-part symmetry. The note glimmered, lingered, and faded into the night. No sheets required, only memory, friendship, and the shared understanding that even the most bothersome squawk can become essential if you place it in the right key.